Of the year, maybe for our Justice Committee. Call this meeting to order. Just before we get into clause by clause for today, all of the members have been emailed an operational budget for Bill C6. I would like to get that approved with your consent so that we can get into clause by clause. Are there any points of questions or clarifications on the operational budget which was emailed to you? The total.
Madame la Présidente, si vous permettez.
Just one question, if you may. Could you explain to us what the budget changes compared to the budget we'd had previously? The issue is not the numbers, they're not very high. That's not the problem, but we had a budget. Is that a supplementary budget?
I'll pass the floor to Mr. Clerk.
Oui, merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Fortin. I think there may be a confusion with another budget that was passed 2 weeks ago, but that was for Bill C7. This is the budget for Bill C6, and that's all. So it's basically something that has already been spent for the work that we've done on C6. Yes, you could say that, but the invoices will be paid in the coming weeks. They're just coming in. Okay, I thought that had been dealt with. As you say, I may be mistaken. Thank you, no problem.
Merci, Monsieur Fortin. I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Fortin.
Mr. Oh, nope. I thought I saw a couple of hands up, but I will. I think they've gone down now. So, do I? Oh, Mr. Moore, is that your hand raised for this operational budget for C6?
Yeah, just on when you're speaking again, I know it's been an ongoing issue, Madam Chair, but really it's like the first, I'm going to say 5 seconds when you're talking, I'm hearing nothing. So when, when I want to I'm on English so that I can hear a translation of everybody who's speaking French, but then when it switches over to you, it's not like it's a 1 second thing. It's virtually everything you're saying is, so unless we're going to switch, every time someone stops talking French, then we quickly switch over to no interpretation. We're really missing quite a bit. I know others have raised it, and I've raised it in the past. There has to be, I would think there has to be a solution. I really only notice it on this committee. On other committees, and in the chamber when we're in our question period and other Zoom meetings I have, hasn't been an issue at all. I'm only noticing on our committee.
Is this better?
I did hear you say, "Is this better?" So it must be.
Well, I changed my my interpretation to the floor, so perhaps I'll try that until we run into any more challenges. But thank you for raising that, and please continue to raise any technical challenges that you have. Appreciate that. So I will then. So we are okay with approving this budget. Can I get a thumbs up from everybody? Yes. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for your cooperation. Now we'll go into clause by clause for Bill C6, pursuant to order of reference made Wednesday, October 28th.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Chair, I would like to say something before we start with the clause by clause.
Mr. Fortin, as you know, whenever you would like to say something, you can just raise your hand, and I'm more than happy to recognize you. But go ahead, Monsieur Fortin.
Yes, I never remember where the raised hand is. So what I wanted to say is that I'm sorry, I don't like the way we're proceeding, because this is a bill that I consider as very important. I feel that everybody on the committee has worked a lot in the last few days on this bill. It's our case here. Many of the people at my office were working on it, and I'm sure it's the same for other members. I'm sure that the people who've been here as witnesses have spent many hours preparing for this and sending us briefs. And as we all know, those briefs were sent to us for the major part yesterday and today. I still got some this morning. I was asking my assistant, and he said we received 246 briefs. Of course, we have not been able to read them all, and we have about 50 of them that we've read. We're still working on it. So this means that there's a lot of people, hundreds of people who were invited by us, by the committee, to tell us what they thought about the bill, and they've not been heard, really. We're not listening to them. I know that nobody here is acting in bad faith, but I think that this shows...
I think this is showing a lack of respect to those people. It's not that we are being irrespectful of the witnesses, but if we start going clause by clause and we vote on this bill this morning, unless there's someone here who has some exceptional skills, I don't think that any of us have read the 246 briefs, if not more, that were tabled. What I'm going to suggest is that we take the time to look at all of the briefs. There may be other amendments that we put forward. And people write to us and they tell us what they think. And, we're saying, okay, with all due respect, I accept what you're saying, but I don't agree.
And there is a technical glitch with the interpretation on the phone lines. So we just want to make sure that that is resolved. Just give us a quick second while we look into it.
Okay.
I'm told phone line on the English channel. There's no translation coming through.
So I will say to those that are on the phone lines to, in the meantime, perhaps use Parleview as we look into the interpretation as an alternative in the meantime. Go ahead, Mr. Fortin. Please continue.
Okay. Je ne sais pas où ça a coupé.
I don't know where I was cut off, but what I was explaining was that the number of briefs that we received, and I think that this was a success. We mustn't complain about getting so many briefs and to find out there were so many people who wanted to appear. It shows that the public is very interested in this. I think that we must bear in mind what those people said to us. We might agree with some, but not others. But regardless, that might encourage us to propose other amendments. Out of respect for the Canadians who wrote to us and who appeared before this committee, I think that we should postpone this clause-by-clause study to a later session, perhaps after we come back in January, so that all of us have time to read the briefs over the holidays and perhaps think about all of that and maybe propose further amendments. I haven't seen anything that really allows me to clarify the definition in Section 5. Now, there are some witnesses who may be on one side or the other, but they all agree that the definition is not clear. Obviously, we have to think about this, each of us. As legislators, I always thought that it was a God-given right that we could look at this, but I think that looking at this, and if we're going to proceed clause by clause and vote on this when we haven't even had time to look at all of the comments and the briefs and the thoughts that citizens have put forward. So I am proposing that we postpone the clause-by-clause study until a later date, i.e. after we come back in January. Thank you.
Fortin, I have Mr. Virani next with his hand raised. Go ahead, sir.
Donc, j'apprécie les commentaires de...
I appreciate Mr. Fortin's comments, but I'd just like to point out that we have made arrangements for this committee to meet. The study of this bill is very important for all Canadians and also important for this committee. Even if we did receive a number of reports, I think that we can nonetheless proceed with what was planned for today. We would like to proceed with a third reading and then the reading in the Senate. So I think that even if we proceed doing the clause-by-clause study today, it doesn't mean that the briefs and the reports and the other information that was submitted will not be considered. It will nonetheless have some impact on the parliamentary process, either in the House or in the Senate.
Garrison?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd just like to point out that there is a procedure for raising amendments at report stage that were unable to be considered at committee. And should there be proposals for amendments in the briefs that came in late, which I know that we will all look at in the intervening period, it would be possible for Mr. Fortin to make those amendments at report stage. And I think he would have a very good argument that for the reason was the volume of submissions that came in and inability to consider it before then. But I would say I would like to proceed today. I think this is an important bill, especially to the sexual orientation and gender identity community in this country. And the longer we go on in a minority parliament, the more we are in danger of bills being lost to an early election. So I think we've had a wide range of witnesses before the committee. We have a good selection of amendments in front of us, and I would like to proceed today.
Madame la Présidente,
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I still don't see how I can use the hand raised button. I was wondering if I had the floor.
comment je fais pour lever la... Je vois pas l'endroit pour lever la main.
I'm sorry, I don't see the hand raised button. I can see the raised hand button, but I'm not quite sure how I activate mine. All right, it's on the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I have found it. Madame Findlay.
Sure whether Monsieur Fortin is putting forward a motion or he's just commenting.
But I'll clarify. Thank you. Thank you, Madame Findlay. Monsieur Fortin, the question for clarification is if you are moving a motion to not study clause by clause today, and if so, what is that text of your motion?
Okay. Alors, oui, je vais en faire une...
Well, yes, I would like to table a motion. I just want to clarify what Mr. Virani just said. I just want to say I'm in agreement with him. It's an important bill, and this is why we receive so many briefs. It's also why I think that when we're dealing with such an important bill, our attitude should not be to just proceed too swiftly. We have to proceed correctly and do it thoroughly. We have to use the time to pass better legislation and not feel we are forced to legislate quickly. So this is a motion indeed that we postpone the clause-by-clause study to a later session after we come back in January.
Thank you for clarifying that, Monsieur Fortin. And as you kind of draft the language of whatever motion that you'd like to present, I'm going to go down the speakers list until I come back to you, so you can move it in proper form. Mr. Virani, I see your hand raised next.
Sorry, I'm just a bit confused because, so are we voting? I understood that on point of order you can't move motion. So are we now dealing with a motion that we're planning to vote on? I just wanted clarification.
To clarify, Madame Findlay had asked if there was a motion before us, and I had turned to Monsieur Fortin to ask if indeed he was going to be putting forward a motion. Monsieur Fortin has clarified for the committee that yes, he intends to put forward that motion. You're absolutely right. He cannot move a motion on a point of order. His hand is raised, so I will go through the speakers list until we get to Monsieur Fortin, and then at that time he can raise his or table his motion, whichever way, or speak to it. Does that clarify for you, Mr. Virani?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Mr. Moore, I have you next on the list.
Well, Madam Finley asked the question I was going to ask, but I know for myself and all committee members, I received a number of briefs last night, and then I received a number of them even today. And, I do think when there's a lot of interest, there's some merit into what Mr. Fortin is saying, because there seems to be a lot of interest. There's certainly diverse views on the bill itself at the 3 meetings that we had on it. So I do sympathize. Mr. Virani said it's important to study this bill, and it is, but part of studying is hearing from Canadians and hearing from different groups and different witnesses. And Madam Finley asked the question, but since I have the floor, I will take a moment to commend our translation services, because the volume, hats off to them.
I agree.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Moore. And I think our translation services and all of Library of Parliament have done a phenomenal job in really getting the translation for that high number of briefs, not only for C6, but also for past legislation. We're really, really blessed to have them support us as we endeavor. Monsieur Fortin, I have you next, so I'm hoping that you have the exact wording of the motion that you'd like to propose.
Oui, la motion irait comme suit.
This would be the motion, that the clause-by-clause study of Bill C6 be postponed or deferred to a later session after we return in January 2021.
Hands raised, so I'll call the question then on Monsieur Fortin's motion. Mr. Clerk, if you'd like to record the vote.
Mr. Cooper?
In support.
Ms. Finley?
I support the motion.
Monsieur Fortin?
Oui.
Mr. Garrison?
Oui, je suis d'accord.
I vote no.
Mr. Calloway?
I vote no.
Mr. Lewis?
I'm in support.
Mr. Maloney?
I vote no.
Mr. Moore?
I vote yes.
Mr. Sangha?
I vote no.
Mr. Virani?
I vote no.
Mr. Zuberi?
Vote against.
Okay. So, yeas pour 5-5, nays contre 6.
So Monsieur Fortin's motion is defeated. We will now continue into clause by clause. Mr. Clerk, is Mr. Fortin's hand raised for a new time or from previous?
Previous.
Okay, I can lower his hand.
I just want to be on the safe side. Thank you, everyone. So I will introduce our witnesses today that will help us in deliberations for clause by clause. From the Department of Justice, we have Carol Morency, who is the Director General and Senior General Counsel, Criminal Law Policy Section. We have Natalie Levman, who is the Senior Counsel, Criminal Law Policy Section. We have Caroline Quesnel, who is Counsel, Criminal Law Policy Section. And then from the Department of Canadian Heritage, we have Fernand Comeau, who is the Executive Director of the LGBTQ2 Secretariat. Welcome to our witnesses, and I remind members that if you have any questions about any of the amendments that are proposed to us, that you are always welcome to refer to the department for clarification and to any of our witnesses. So, going into clause by clause. So, as you guys know, pursuant to Standing Order 75 Sub 1, consideration of the preamble will be postponed until the end. Right now, I call the question on Clause 1. Since there were no amendments proposed for Clause 1, I call the question on Clause 1 unless somebody wants to raise their hand. I don't see any hands raised at this time. So I will call the question on Clause 1. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Cooper?
Against?
Ms. Findlay?
No.
Monsieur Fortin?
Oui.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Calloway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
I vote against.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sangha?
Yes.
Mr. Virani?
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4, 4.
So Clause 1 is carried. We'll now move on to Clause 2. As there are no amendments proposed for Clause 2 and I don't see any hands raised for discussion, I will call the question then on Clause 2. Shall Clause 2 carry?
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Ms. Findlay?
No.
Monsieur Fortin?
Oui.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Calloway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sangha?
Yes.
Mr. Virani?
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4, 4.
Thank you. So Clause 2 is carried. We'll now move on to Clause 3 and the first amendment before us, which is PV1. Just for members to understand, the vote on PV1 will also apply to PV2. If PV1 is adopted, that means PV2 will also be adopted. Therefore, NDP1, NDP5, NDP6, NDP7, NDP9, and NDP10 cannot be moved because they are consequential to one another. So I will now turn to Ms. Atwin if you'd like to speak to PV1.
Thank you very much, and I thank everyone for their time today. So what we've proposed is that Bill C6 in Clause 3 be amended by replacing line 14 on page 4 with the following: conversion therapy. In order to protect the fundamental rights of all individuals targeted by the cruel practice of conversion therapy, we are of the opinion that this practice should be completely banned and that we are not leaving the option for it to exist. Therefore, we deem essential that the motive or the willingness of an individual for taking part in these therapies doesn't preclude the harm that it's causing on society as a whole and the proliferation of hateful and discriminatory values and myths among certain groups in Canada. To reflect that opinion, the word force should be removed. And I would just like to add that I have been carefully following the testimony on this, and I appreciate so much the amendments and efforts put forward by Mr. Garrison in particular and the NDP. And so very much this amendment reflects that same kind of sentiment. And I would just turn to some of the testimony from some of the social workers who appeared before this committee. And they mentioned that it's important to note that all conversion therapy is inherently fraudulent, coercive, and dangerous, that the government legislation should apply to all ages without exception. So that is my justification for this amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Atwin. Mr. Garrison, I see your hand raised. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the Green Party for this amendment. I know that it was originally put forward before we had actually any testimony before the committee, but I know that Ms. Atwin has been following along. I, of course, support the goal of his amendment. I have an amendment to the same section which proposes a different way of accomplishing the same thing. And we did hear much testimony and concern, in particular from the Minister of Justice, that we have a conversion therapy bill that would withstand any possible court challenge. So in the amendment, which we will deal with this immediately following if this one is not adopted, I proposed a different strategy, which was to add the word adults alongside children, rather than simply making the bill a flat ban. And I know this is a technical and legal point, but what that does is it leaves room for courts, if they chose to strike down the ban on conversion therapy for consenting adults, to leave the rest of the bill intact. And so while I do obviously support the same goal, I am going to vote against this amendment because I think there's a better legal strategy for accomplishing the same goal.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. We'll now go to Mr. Zuberi.
I'd like to support what Mr. Garrison just said, which is that, I mean, we know that there are a number of other amendments that are coming forth from both the Green Party and the NDP. And I'd like us to actually give those full consideration. As the chair mentioned, if we vote on this now, then we won't be giving full consideration to the other amendments. And for the reasons that Mr. Garrison just mentioned and other reasons, I'd like us to actually evaluate those amendments. And for this reason, I'm personally voting no on this particular question.
You want to? Okay, well, thank you for that, Mr. Zuberi. I don't see any more hands raised on PV1, so call the question. And just a reminder to members that the vote on PV1 also applies to PV2. Mr. Clerk, if you can please record the vote.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Ms. Findlay?
No.
Monsieur Fortin? Monsieur Fortin?
Non. On vous entend pas bien, Monsieur le greffier. Je ne sais pas si vous m'aviez appelé plusieurs fois. Je vous ai entendu un peu, mais peu.
Je vais me rapprocher un peu du micro.
Ah, OK, peut-être.
Mr. Clerk, we can't hear you very well. Well, I'll get closer to my mic then, Mr. Fortin. So that was against.
Mr. Garrison?
I vote against.
Mr. Calloway?
I vote against.
Mr. Lewis?
I vote against.
Mr. Maloney?
I vote against.
Mr. Moore?
I vote against.
Mr. Sangha?
Against.
Mr. Virani?
I vote against.
Mr. Zuberi?
I vote against.
Yeas pour 0. Et nays contre 11.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And so PV1 and PV2 are defeated. We'll now move to NDP1. And just for members' clarity, the vote on NDP1 also applies to NDP5, NDP9, and NDP10 because they are consequential to each other. If NDP1 is adopted, then NDP6 and NDP7 cannot be moved because of a line conflict. So I turn to Mr. Garrison to speak to NDP1.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I did explain the difference between the Green Party amendment and mine briefly before. I just want to echo what Ms. Atwin said, is we heard very powerful testimony that the professionals who deal with mental health issues and who deal with identity issues have universally said that conversion therapy is inherently harmful and is a fraudulent practice. And therefore, the argument that someone could actually consent to being defrauded or consent to being harmed is not something which would be strongly supported anywhere else in the criminal code. And so I would like to add the word adults alongside children, as I said, and create what would in effect be a ban on conversion therapy completely in this country. I won't go on with a very long argument about that. I think we heard very clear testimony. I think perhaps members' views are quite well known on this already, and I would hope to have support of the majority of the committee for a complete ban on conversion therapy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Mr. Virani.
So first of all, I want to say welcome to the officials from the Department of Justice and from the Department of Heritage. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to Ms. Atwin for participating and suggesting amendments. And thank you to Mr. Garrison for moving this point. It's a difficult issue, and what I can indicate in terms of sort of my thinking on this, and I think it reflects a number of people, including my fellow Liberal colleagues, is that we're trying to ensure that we address conversion therapy in its most pernicious form and addressing those who are most vulnerable. So that's the first point. Secondly, we were trying to carefully balance a bill, and in carefully balancing it, we're trying to, although one can never guarantee matters, but we're trying to diminish risk from a constitutional perspective. And what I would say to those who want to ensure that the ban that currently exists in the law, which is vis-a-vis children, and as it's currently stipulated in the bill, it talks about also a ban with respect to adults who are participating in conversion therapy against their will. And I think, and I'll put that aside for a second because I think that language can be improved. And there's some amendments on the table that relate to that. But when you remove the ability of adults to voluntarily participate in this, we do risk potential exposure on this legislation. And I think that would be to the detriment of all Canadians, particularly LGBTQ2 Canadians, because having this bill struck down would serve no one's interest. So I think the bill tries to craft a careful balance, protecting those who are vulnerable from the harms of conversion therapy, but also protecting the rights and freedoms of those who may choose different types of interventions based on their own autonomous choices. So complete ban would be inconsistent with that balancing that we're trying to achieve. I think where we've landed right now, where there is a ban, an outright ban for children, and including a ban where adults are coerced or influenced against their will, is important. I do think that we can improve the language on adult protections, and I think we'll get to that later on during the course of our discussions, add clause by clause. So to not risk jeopardizing this important protection, which would be neutered effectively through a successful constitutional challenge, my view is that we should oppose this amendment to keep it where it is, subject to further protections for non-consenting adults, which we'll deal with later. So I will be voting against this proposed amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Virani. Madam Findlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we're all struggling here somewhat because we're faced with legislation with very vague definitions. I haven't heard anyone in favor of coercive conversion therapy, but we're left with vagueness overall as to what that even means, who it affects, how that will play out. So this is why Monsieur Fortin's suggestion that we read the 300 briefs that have come to us, which we've had no time to read, and that we actually pay attention more carefully to what is being put forward and what's presented to us would have made sense. We're sitting here going through clause by clause, trying to gerrymander and add in bits and pieces with a piece of legislation that has fundamental flaws in it from the beginning. I won't be, it's difficult, very difficult for us to be asked as legislators for a bill where the overall intent is something I agree with, to be forced into a situation where we're being asked to vote on a very flawed piece of legislation, clearly put together too vaguely, too broadly. It will be challenged in the courts, probably successfully, and we'll be right back where we started. And it's unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Findlay. I don't see any other hands raised at this time. So I will call the question on NDP 1, and just so members are aware, the vote on NDP 1 also applies to NDP 5, NDP 9, and NDP 10 because they are consequential. And if NDP 1 is adopted, then NDP 6 and 7 cannot be moved. So, Mr. Clerk, I call the question on NDP 1. Shall it carry?
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Ms. Findlay?
I abstain.
Monsieur Fortin?
No.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Callaway?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Maloney?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sangha?
No.
Mr. Virani?
No.
Mr. Zuberi?
No.
Yeas pour 1, nays contre 9, 9.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So NDP 1 is defeated, and then consequentially NDP 5, 9, and 10 are also defeated. Now, I call the question on Clause 3, seeing there are no more amendments. Shall Clause 3 carry? Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Cooper?
I abstain.
Ms. Findlay?
I abstain.
Monsieur Fortin?
Oui, mais j'aurais bien envie de m'abstenir moi aussi. Je vous dis que...
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Callaway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
I abstain.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes, and Mr. Chair, when Mr. Fortin speaks, the translation is not always working. Just, I don't know if other people are having the same experience.
Mr. Moore?
I abstain.
Mr. Sangha?
Yes.
Mr. Virani?
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, 7, nays contre 0, 0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And so Clause 3 is carried. I'm just going to take a pause here and make sure that the interpretation is working properly for French, because I myself am having some difficulties. There's a huge lag. Thank you. So we'll go to Clause 4. If any members would like to speak to Clause 4. Not seeing any. I'll call the question on Clause 4 as there are no amendments. Shall Clause 4 carry? Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Cooper?
I abstain.
Ms. Findlay?
I abstain.
Monsieur Fortin? Monsieur Fortin?
On est sur l'article 4, là, je crois, hein?
We're on Article 4. The sound is very bad this morning. I don't know why. I'm not hearing well. The volume is high here. Yes, I will vote for.
Listen?
Yes.
Mr. Callaway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
I abstain.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Abstain.
Mr. Sangha,
Yes.
Mr. Virani,
Yes.
Monsieur Zuberi,
Yes.
Yes pour 8.
8.
0, 0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And so clause 4 is, it carries. Moving on now to clause 5 and NDP 2. Just a note to members, if NDP 2 is adopted, NDP 3 and CPC 1 cannot be moved because of a line conflict. So I will then turn to Mr. Garrison.
सर जी बाद में कॉल करता हूँ.
Mr. Sangha, I believe that you're not on mute. And I'll just remind members that if you're not speaking, to please remain on mute so as not to interrupt committee. So we'll go to Mr. Garrison now to move NDP 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A little trouble getting off mute. The lines involved here actually raise several issues, and I understand that there may be another amendment from the floor from the Liberals on these same lines, and I am prepared to defer to the floor amendment from the Liberals because I think it might make more sense to discuss that before NDP 2. And I believe Mr. Virani has such an amendment. So I would be prepared to defer to hear his floor amendment.
Mr. Virani, if you'd like to speak to that.
Sure, Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you to Mr. Garrison. So the lines that are in question relate to in C6, they relate to clause 5 and lines 30 to 32. And I think there's a meeting of the minds here between ourselves and the NDP with respect to the importance of emphasizing the need to protect not only sexual orientation and gender identity, but also gender expression. And the language that we would be proposing by way of either a new amendment or an amendment to what Mr. Garrison is suggesting is simply to insert gender expression into lines 32 and 33. And what I can do is I can read it to you, Madam Chair, but line 32 to 33, if we all have it in front of us, line 32 to 33 now reads, it currently reads, gender identity to cisgender, comma, or to repress or reduce non-heterosexual attraction or sexual behavior, period. And then the two words for greater. And the idea would be to insert gender expression into those two lines. So it would now read, quote, gender identity or gender expression to cisgender, comma, or to repress or reduce non-cisgender gender expression or non-heterosexual attraction or sexual behavior, period, for greater. So the insertion is basically a total of 8 words. The words or gender expression would be inserted, and the words non-cisgender gender expression or would be inserted as well. And that is to address what we heard in testimony, what we've heard from stakeholders, what we've heard from written briefs, that to ensure that this bill is as comprehensive as possible and also tracks other instruments, including human rights legislation, etc., and in terms of its language and verbiage, that we have not only reference to sexual orientation and gender identity, which is currently in the bill, but also a reference to gender expression. And that is, I think, where we have an understanding with the NDP with respect to the necessity of that kind of change. So I would move that language be used in lines 32 to 33 on page 4 of clause 5. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Virani. Can I please ask if you can email us that language so that all members are very clear as to what exactly it is that we're proposing? And I'm wondering if you have it in both languages as well. As we wait for that email to be circulated, I'll turn to Mr. Moore. You have your hand raised. Go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, this is absolutely astounding, if you ask me, that the government, together with the NDP, I remember when the minister was here just, I guess it was last week, said that he had the brightest and best minds around the drafting of the definition. And we've been talking about, the definition and the importance of getting it right. The minister assured us that it was bang on and in no need of any changes whatsoever, and any other changes would be just redundant. What Mr. Virani is proposing here is not what I would view as a friendly amendment to Mr. Garrison's amendment. They do two different things. Mr. Garrison's removes some of the language, my read of it, around cisgender, for example, and adds in gender expression. Mr. Virani's reinserts that language and maintains adding in gender expression. And since, Madam Chair, you can just interrupt me if I'm wrong on this, but I think I heard you say if we adopt NDP2, then as amended, perhaps, then CPC 1 would not be would be dropped. And for that reason, I do want to speak to CPC 1 really quickly, because we'll not get a chance to otherwise. And because of the lack of clarity around the definition of conversion therapy, what CPC 1 would do, as opposed to NDP 2, as amended by the government, would be to explicitly say that it's as a part of an effort to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. I think we need to be clear that that's what conversion therapy is. It's an effort to change a person's gender identity or sexual orientation. I think that the amendment that the government's proposing further muddies the waters. I much prefer the amendment that we're proposing, and it's for that reason I would not be supporting the government's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Just before I go to Mr. Garrison, I'd just like to advise members that the phone lines are now working with interpretation. So, Mr. Garrison, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I do appreciate Mr. Moore's comments. These lines are critical in the bill, and that's why, after discussions with Mr. Virani, I have agreed that while I would like broader changes in that section, and the government is not prepared to entertain those, for me, the most important goal here is to make sure that gender expression is part of the bill, and that we are protecting Canadians against attempts to change their gender identity or their gender expression. And so being a realist, I'm prepared to accept that his changes here are in the spirit of what I was trying to do to ensure that inclusion. Of course, I prefer my own language in the two amendments that follow, but I'm prepared to accept this, and I think it's an important expansion of protections in the bill. Thank you.
Okay, so we're still waiting, Mr. Virani, for that language just so that we can have clarity. My understanding is that there's a little bit of discrepancy around the line numbers. I think you referred to line 30 to 32, where I think the amendment might be from 31 to 32. But we are waiting for that email just so that members can be very clear as to what the new language would look like.
So, Madam Chair, I apologize if I misspoke. I believe, looking at the English version of the text, that the amendment would be to lines 32 and 33 of the documentation. And there's two ways we can go about this. We could employ the assistance. It's literally 8 words that I'm inserting. The assistance of Legislative Counsel, who I believe is in the committee room with you, in terms of what the French language word should be for those 8 words that I'm choosing to insert, or we can wait. I'm having a translation worked up as we speak, and we could perhaps move on to other amendments that aren't related to this and dispose of these and return to the discussion of this amendment when the translation is available. So I'm in your hands in that regard.
So just to confirm, Mr. Varani, is the translation being done by somebody from our legislative team, or is that separate from that?
The translation would be vetted by the Legislative Council, obviously, but the translation is being worked on by people that have better facility in French than me.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Moore. Sorry, I was just seeking some clarity over here. Go ahead, sir.
Well, no, I guess I do find this astounding. You know, the minister appeared here, and I guess it takes a certain amount of hubris. I've got a lot of respect for the minister, but anytime you come and present a bill to a committee and basically indicate that it's perfect, probably no need to hear from any witnesses because we did such a bang-up job drafting it. And now at the 11th hour, like, this is a government bill. We're in the opposition. We do not have the resources of government. We have to listen to witnesses when it comes to drafting amendments. All of us around this table work very hard at that as parliamentarians. We do not have the resources of government. So now, why at the 11th hour, like this should have been in our hands. I go, why on earth would the government be putting forward an amendment that, in my view, alters the bill? We would have heard at best conflicting evidence on an expansion to include gender expression, but this shouldn't be new to the government. They should be aware of these things, and they should have had this. If they want this, they should have had it in the drafting of the bill, not literally like in the moment proposing amendments. I can understand that if it's coming from the Green Party, the Bloc, NDP, or even ourselves. Yeah, sometimes with a compressed time frame like we had of only 4 days, something could come up in witness testimony that we might want to react on. But for the government itself to be proposing a change, and I guess I'd like to hear from maybe some of the lawyers with the Department of Justice on what this change in wording would mean in practice, because we don't have we all sat here in testimony where it's not clear what is encaptured definitively by the government's definition of conversion therapy. What we do know is the minister has used words in the introduction of this bill that we've urged them to include in the legislation. The government chose not to do that. And now we see at the 11th hour or past, the government is scrambling to make changes. So I think they have the wording, of course, that Mr. Varani's proposing in front of them. In law, what is the change that we are now being asked to contemplate literally on the fly?
Thank you, Mr. Moore, for that. I will defer to the witnesses, but first I feel that we need to suspend as we wait for this language to come in, and I do need to confer with the legislative team over here as well, just on that wording. So we'll just suspend for a couple of minutes as we get clarity on this amendment. Thank you for your patience, members. Just to confirm, have members all received the new proposed language? Just if you can just show me a thumbs up if you've received it. Are we missing Mr. Moore? There he is. Okay, sorry, Mr. Moore, we didn't mean to start there without you. So just checking to see if you've received the email with the new language for NDP 2. As members are reviewing that language, I'll pass the floor on to Mr. Legislative Clerk to speak to what would be the easiest process to insert this language. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, just to
Point
be
of
sure.
order.
Yes, Mr. Moore.
Madam Chair, before you suspended, I had asked a question of the government witnesses on the language that's being proposed. So before we get into how we, fix this, I'd like to hear, before we hear about how we would mechanically do this, I'd like to hear what the language does. How is it different than what the minister came here last week and proposed that was A1 ready to go? It seems to me a significant departure from what the minister had presented. And the fact that it's coming from the government, I find surprising. So I'd like to hear an explanation of how this would change the law in Canada versus what was originally presented.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So I will turn to the department. I understand that you do have the language in front of you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just on the same point of order.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Varani.
I just think it's a bit erroneous to leave the record reflecting that the minister wasn't open to amendments. He clearly indicated in his testimony before this committee 2 weeks ago that he was open to amendments. And I believe the issue of entrenching gender expression was directly put to him by Mr. Garrison. So I just think the record should reflect that. And that's what this amendment seeks to do, is insert gender expression into the definition of what would constitute conversion therapy under 320.102. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Varani. We'll now go to the department for comment on this language.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. I'm hoping you can hear me. And I will comment on the impact of the amendment that is before you. I do have it before me as well. And what it would do is amend the definition to include practices, treatments, or services designed to change gender expression to cisgender, and practices, treatments, or services designed to reduce or repress non-cisgender expression. So by doing that, it would expand the scope of the definition to include an additional way of showing that a particular intervention, practice, treatment, or service constitutes conversion therapy, as I just explained. This approach would assist in preventing conversion therapists from seeking to avoid criminal liability by arguing that their interventions are not designed to make a person cisgender, but only to reduce or repress certain forms of expression, even though changing identity is their true objective. I would also note that this is criminal legislation, so it has to be narrowly interpreted with reference to the legislation's overall objective, and that objective is to target interventions that are known to cause harm because they're designed to change identity, as explained in the bill's preamble. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that.
Madam Chair, on that,
Sorry.
I think that
Mr. Moore, is that on a point of order? Because I don't see your hand raised, but I do see Madame Finley's hand raised.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Madame Finley.
I'm not even sure of the procedure here, if it's just a point of clarification of the last witness, but I have a question on what she just stated. Is that correct? Thank you for your statements, but you actually said in there when it is someone's true intention to do otherwise. I don't understand how you can get into the intention of a person based on the language. I don't understand how you can say that that's what it means. Isn't intention a matter of a combination of fact and law, depending on the circumstances of the case in front of you? So I don't really understand how you can speak to intention.
Chair, may I respond?
Yes, please.
Thank you for that question. And perhaps I wasn't clear when I was explaining the amendment. I first attempted to explain the legal scope of the amendment so that you would understand what it captures in law. I then attempted to understand what I understand to be one of the main objectives of including a separate way of showing that a particular intervention is conversion therapy. So I was in no way commenting on the scope of the law. I was commenting more on what objective the amendment may be trying to achieve, as I understand it from those who have made comments before this committee about their concerns in respect of gender expression. I hope that clarifies for you, and I welcome any further questions you may have.
So if I'm understanding you right, it was your interpretation of the intention of those putting it forward, but that's not your, that's not a comment by you as to what it actually says, right? You're going further in what you're saying to give your interpretation of what you believe the reasons are for putting it forward, correct?
It's my understanding, based on testimony that you've heard before the committee, based on briefs that I've read about the concerns in respect of the lack of inclusion of gender expression in the definition, that the goal would be to avoid opportunities for avoiding criminal liability by simply saying, well, I wasn't really trying to change a person's identity. I was just trying to reduce certain forms of expression. We know that reducing non-cisgender gender expression often forms part of conversion therapy that's aimed at changing gender identity to cisgender. And the witnesses have come forward and raised this as a concern. I consider it to be an evidentiary issue. And so my understanding is that this amendment is trying to address that evidentiary issue in the same way that the other branch of the test in respect of non-heterosexual attraction and sexual behavior is intended to address evidentiary issues associated with proving that a particular conversion therapy intervention is aimed at changing sexual orientation to heterosexual. But
thank you. I think we agree that you're speaking to an evidentiary issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Finley. We'll now go to Mr. Moore. I see your hand raised.
Yeah, this last minute change by the government, it to me is extremely problematic. I don't accept that this narrows the scope because it is criminal. And we've been saying all along, a criminal code sanction is a government's most serious sanction. So it's important that we get it right. It's important that we know what is captured. And originally, this bill, even in the preamble, purported to deal and identify conversion therapy as dealing with trying to change someone's sexual orientation from cisgender or gender identity. But now we're adding gender expression. So I think it's important to see from experts, okay, because we did not hear this at committee. We did not hear a clear definition of, okay, this is how we define gender identity, this is how we define gender expression, and this is how they are distinct, so that we're adding new language to this legislation. Again, on the fly. I'm not saying whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm saying it's shocking that we're seeing this the day we're doing clause by clause. This could have been brought up anytime by the minister, but the minister did not bring this up, and it's being added. So how does the department, or how do we define within the criminal code, we're going to perhaps have a new definition of conversion therapy. And we heard from a number of witnesses that said this definition of conversion therapy does not mirror other definitions that have been used in other other legislation. So for the purposes of the criminal code, how do we define gender identity, and how do we define gender expression, to show that, the minister raised great concerns about redundancy. He was concerned about any effort to further clarify the definition when I raised that with him. So what is the distinction that the minister is proposing on gender identity versus gender expression?
Thanks, Mr. Moore. We'll go to the department for clarification on that.
Thank you for the question. You'll know that the terms are not defined in the criminal code. They are defined in various places for different purposes, and their meaning is understood. Admittedly, gender expression is a very broad term. It's about how one expresses one's own gender to the world. And I've acknowledged in my comments that this amendment would broaden the definition, and it's my understanding that that is for evidentiary reasons. I also note that the terms gender expression and gender identity are used in other places in the criminal code and in human rights legislation, and they do have meaning in law. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. We'll go to Monsieur
Do
Fortin.
I still have the floor, Madam Chair, or I guess...
No, if you can please raise your hand again. I do. Mr. Fortin's been waiting for a while as well. Go ahead, Monsieur Fortin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the Justice Department's website, I read something, and I too don't find that the terms identity expression and gender expression and gender identity, I don't see the distinction very well. But on the website, I can read the definition of gender expression. This is the way someone expresses openly their gender, and that includes behaviors, appearance, how someone dresses, and combs their hair, etc. So what I gather from this is that the bill would forbid a therapy conversion, a practice, a treatment, or a service aimed at repressing this. But the example that I have in mind is a little boy, an 8-year-old boy, who one morning decides before going to school that today he'll wear a dress. Maybe his mother will say, sure, maybe she'll say, no. But if we keep this definition, if the mother says, no, I don't want you to wear a dress, you'll wear pants today, it will be a criminal act. It will be an offense. If we pass this definition, I have a problem with that. Can the analysts help us with that?
I'll defer to the department on that question, please.
Je voudrais répondre en anglais.
I'll answer in English if you don't mind. I'm sorry, but it will be just easier for me.
It's an excellent question. I think, though, we have to remember that there are two parts to the definition, and the intervention really has to amount to a practice, treatment, or service. And we heard the minister explain the meaning behind those terms and what they imply during his opening remarks before this committee. And they do require some kind of formalized intervention. So merely saying to your child, you can't, to your male child, as you have suggested, that you can't wear a skirt to school would not amount to a practice, treatment, or service, and therefore, in my view, would not be caught by the definition, including its expanded version.
Thank you. We'll go to Mr. Virani now.
So I have several comments to make. So I think Ms. Levman's response, I think, is absolutely accurate. I think it strains credulity to think that a conversation between a parent and a child about what to wear on a given day, conversations that I have with my children on any given day, usually related to the weather, would actually amount to a treatment, service, or practice pursuant to the criminal code. And there is an axiom that most lawyers in this committee would recall, that the law does not concern itself with trivial things. I would go so far as to say that's quite a trivial concern. With respect to many of the things that have been raised here by Ms. Finlay and by Mr. Moore, first of all, I think Mr. Moore may have misspoken when he said it sounds like it's narrowing the scope. This amendment is not narrowing, it is expanding. So let's be crystal clear about that. Secondly, there was some reference to perhaps whether department officials were imputing motive or speculating about why such an amendment would be made. The objective of this amendment is to capture exactly what was articulated, which is different types of therapy masquerading as something that they are not, to try to escape criminal liability. That is informed by the testimony we heard from many witnesses, and that is critical. I think Mr. Moore referred to the fact we need to hear from more experts. I would put it to him that we actually already have. And I would put it to him that I think it's a bit erroneous to assert that somehow we are being surprised by the insertion of gender expression at clause by clause. Repeated amendments, including my own to the preamble, refer to the term gender expression. So the term is known to the committee members in terms of it's already in the clause by clause package. It's known in law under the Criminal Code and under the Canada Human Rights Act. And it is certainly known to all of us who went through the committee study because we heard it repeatedly from witnesses. So on that basis, I would think we are more than ready to exercise a decision as to whether this amendment is worthy of pursuit and whether it should be carried into the legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Virani. Madam Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand what's before us, and I understand that I now can make my own decision as to whether I support this amendment or not. But when Mr. Virani speaks to things being confirmed by testimony, we heard some testimony on gender expression. We heard conflicting testimony on gender expression. But because it wasn't before us in this clause, we didn't know that we would be considering it within this clause. I find it difficult to understand that an amendment is dropped on us on the floor for which we had to suspend the committee for several minutes. It was dropped without translation, clearly known to Mr. Garrison ahead of time, clearly known to Mr. Virani ahead of time, because Mr. Garrison, with all due respect, he stepped back and said, I am going to give the floor to my friend, Mr. Virani, my colleague, in order so that he can put this forward. So why are we dealing with it in committee, trying to get translations, being told to suspend, which was the appropriate thing for you to do, Madam Chair, in the circumstances, when clearly they had conversations either the last few days, last night, this morning, I don't know when, and yet we only get it here dropped on us at the last minute, changing a definition, expanding the definition. Yes, I agree with Mr. Virani. It is an expansion of the definition. It's a large expansion of the definition. And they can belittle Monsieur Fortin's example by saying it's trivial. He was just throwing something out there, in my view, as an example. Yes, a trivial one, not actually meaning that specific issue necessarily. He's just trying to understand it because we don't understand it when it is dropped on us in this way. So, for us to be put in a position of having to assume definitions now on an expanded definition makes it very difficult to deal with, and it is not the way we normally should proceed, and not the way the government should proceed on a piece of government legislation that is so important. This is a very important bill. There's a lot of Canadians wanting to see how this turns out, and we, on the Conservative side of the House, in our attempts to get some clarity and some comfort for those who are concerned about these expanded definitions or any definition, are being shut down, while at the same time we're having expanded versions dropped on us at the last minute, putting us in a very difficult position.
Thank you, Madame Finley. And just, I will clarify, the amendments that were emailed to members today from the floor did have translation. So they were in both official languages.
Once we got them, Madam Chair, but when this first started, we did not have translations, and we had to suspend the committee for several minutes, I don't know how long it was in the end, in order to get them emailed to us sitting here with translation. That could have been prepared ahead of time. Clearly, that's my point. Clearly, the government members and the NDP member were talking outside this committee, or they wouldn't have known what they were about to do. And we were left not knowing. That's not acceptable.
Thank you. Monsieur Fortin, I have you next on the list, sir. Go ahead.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'm having a difficult time hearing. I don't know if anybody else is. There's an echo on my end from you and the last speaker, MP Finley. I'm just wondering if anybody else has that.
Is that the case for other members as well?
Yeah, I couldn't hear it either.
I can always start again, Madam Chair.
I couldn't hear either.
But I got the gist of it.
Thanks for
That's
that.
all I need, Mr. Maloney, just so you get the gist.
Well, let's try again. Mr. Fortin, if you can please go ahead, sir.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I would like to say something. Mr. Virani's comment about the triviality of my example seems very particular. I don't think that it is insignificant, this example. If Mr. Virani will look at the jurisprudence, the common law, he'll realize that a lot of things that may seem trivial in his eyes have gone up to the Supreme Court and have seemed very valid for the courts. My intervention wasn't insignificant, and neither was his. His amendment is not insignificant. It is very important and should be discussed. So having said that, I'd like to come back to the analyst of the Justice Department, Mrs. Levman. I have a problem with the answer she has given. I understand what she's saying when she says that a parent's intervention is not a treatment, a service, or a practice. I understand that. But in my opinion, a parent's intervention could be considered a practice. If Mrs. Levman says that, no, it is not a practice, then I would like her to explain the distinction she makes between practice, treatment, or therapy, and service. Because the legislator should not say anything without meaning. We have to find definitions for practice, therapy, and service. In my own interpretation, which is not insignificant, but maybe different from Mr. Virani's, I think that we could easily say that a parent's intervention, or a tutor or someone else, or a neighbor saying to the boy, you should be wearing pants, it could be a girl who'd be told to wear a dress. The Justice Department's definition does not only pertain to clothes. We could talk about other things, and I could also say that includes appearance, behavior, choices in what you wear, your hair, body language, and your voice. So it is many things that are part of the gender expression. It's a lot of behaviors that I would say as a parent, maybe I have told my daughter, maybe you shouldn't wear so much makeup. Maybe you should wear less makeup. And from what I understand, when I have this practice, because I think it could be considered a practice, it could be considered as a criminal offense. I don't think that's what we want. I'm not naive. I'm not stupid. And I understand that the justice minister and my colleagues don't want that either. But what I'm afraid of is that we'll write a statute that could lead to such extremities where it would be interpreted in an extreme way. And we don't want that. And this is why, since the beginning of our study of C6, I've been saying that Clause 5 for 320.101 should obviously be rewritten completely. This is the most ambiguous definition we could imagine for a topic that is so important and that should be dealt with, should be given more attention.
So what distinction is being made between treatment practice and service? And if you look at a practice that is not carried out by a professional, because there's no reference to health professionals, there's just general reference here. So if you're talking about treatment, you're talking about a psychologist or doctor, but a practice, in my view, could be performed by anyone. You could tell a young man, okay, you shouldn't wear makeup, or to a girl, you shouldn't wear pants. You say, and it's not appropriate. So things like that, those are practices that a teacher or a parent or a tutor or a friend could exercise to tell a young person, and that could be interpreted by some people by being banned, and it could be a criminal act. And so this could be something extremely serious.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to say at the outset that we are, Mr. Fortin and I are in agreement on the expansiveness of the term gender expression. I don't disagree with anything he said about its meaning. In terms of the term practice, I do acknowledge that it's broader than the other terms, treatment or service. As the minister explained in his comments, it means something that an action that happens habitually or regularly. But I would just take note that every word has to be interpreted in its context and purposively, and the overall objective, and consistent with the overall objective of the bill, which is to target harmful practices that we have evidence for cause harm, and these concern changing gender identity to cisgender and sexual orientation to heterosexual. And so the terms need to be interpreted in that light. They will also, courts may also look to places where those terms have been used in other contexts. And in all of those contexts, whether it's criminal code or provincial healthcare legislation that even deals with conversion therapy, we are looking at some kind of formalized intervention. I note that practice, treatment, and service is used in certain provincial territorial legislation dealing with conversion therapy. So the overall objectives of the bill are going to influence how those terms are interpreted. And then it's up to courts, of course, to apply the definition to specific circumstances, to the facts of each case. So those are my comments on the scope of the definition, and in particular, the meaning of the term practice. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Mr. Moore.
Yeah, the more I'm hearing, the more problematic this is. The one thing I'll agree with Mr. Varani on is this is an expansion of the definition of conversion therapy. It's introducing new language that the government did not put forward originally. I'm going to ask the department. I think this certainly opens up the legislation to a charter challenge, more so than the original wording. But what bothers me, Madam Chair, is with all due respect to everyone around the table, now it seems plain to me that the intention was always, and again, the whole resources of government, which we in opposition do not have. This isn't a new bill. It was introduced before the Prime Minister prorogued, and it's been brought back. They've had all the time in the world to work on it. Last night, at the end of day, it was I think it was around 5:30 here in Atlantic, so it would have been 4:30 Eastern time. We received a government amendment to their own legislation. Did it amend this clause? No. It amended the preamble to include gender expression. And I thought at the time, well, why are they amending the preamble to include gender expression, but they're not amending the bill to include gender expression? So it would have been nice to have that amendment last night. We didn't. And now we fast forward to today, where we're trying to do clause by clause on what is an important bill, and the government table drops this amendment without an explanation, without hearing witness testimony on what this amendment would do, how it broadens the bill, what the effect would be. And to me, it's completely unacceptable that we would conduct ourselves that way. It'd be more excusable if it came from an opposition party, because we don't have the resources of government. But to propose, all of us were told, get our amendments in on time, which we all did. The Green Party, and they certainly don't have the caucus resources of the larger parties, let alone government. They got their amendments in, the NDP, and we put forward 2 amendments to this bill on time. And then last night at end of day, we get a government amendment to the preamble, which doesn't make any sense because it doesn't align with the legislation. And then midway through clause by clause, they table drop an amendment. That is 100% unacceptable. And I don't know how they expect opposition parties to be able to deal with that. They come to the table without a clear explanation of what the bill does, or what the change does, only to say it's more expansive. It's going to capture more things. Of course it does. Originally it said sexual orientation, gender identity. Now it says gender expression. But we as parliamentarians do not have a clear idea of what is that going to capture in our criminal code legislation. So I'm really disappointed. It's completely unacceptable. I don't know why we didn't receive the government's amendment last night when we received the amendment to the preamble. But anyway, it is disappointing, and I would like an answer on this. In my view, a broadening of what is captured by in the definition will almost certainly result in a greater chance of the legislation being struck down under the charter. So maybe if we get an answer on that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I assume that's over to me.
Sorry, yes, through you, Madam Chair, to the department lawyer. Thank you. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. It might not be fair to you either, because I can only assume, through you, Madam Chair, to the Department of Heritage and Department of Justice lawyers, I can only assume that that's not how they would conduct themselves, because they would have had this in the original legislation, or that would have been presented to us in a timely manner. But unfortunately, at the 11th hour yesterday, the government decides to amend the preamble, and then today we find out why when we're in the middle of our meeting. The government table drops an amendment to their own legislation.
Mr. Moore, we'll just
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Garrison.
There's just a little untruth in what's being said here. NDP2 and NDP3, which were in the amendment package, both propose adding gender expression. So the topic we're talking about here was included in the package, and members should have been prepared to deal with it. We heard testimony on that numerous times in the debate on this bill. So no, there was no collusion away from the table. I did not see the text of this amendment, but what I did do was continue to advocate for the most disadvantaged, the most discriminated elements of our population, who are transgender and non-binary Canadians. And the government said they would listen, and they did listen. But this topic has been in the amendment package from the very beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. I'm not sure if that was a point of order, though. So we'll just quickly go to the department to comment on Mr. Moore's question, and then we have Mr. Cooper next on the list, and then Mr. Garrison. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just note that the charter issues or considerations that are raised by the bill are outlined in the charter statement that is available on the department's website. We do know that based on what the minister has said, and even what some witnesses have said before your committee, that the bill does attempt to strike a balance between the equality and dignity of LGBTQ people on one hand, and the rights and freedoms of individuals who may choose to receive or provide conversion therapy on the other. And it's also, we have to remember that a court's analysis is going to be very much shaped by its interpretation of these provisions. And I can't stress enough how important it is that criminal legislation be read narrowly. That is a fundamental principle of statutory interpretation. And with respect to its overall objectives. And the overall objectives that this bill is trying to achieve is to stop certain types of interventions that we know cause harm. We have evidence about it, and those interventions are designed to change who a person is, their identity, to match societal norms. And so I anticipate that the legislation's provisions will be interpreted according to those rules. And the fine balance that it seeks to achieve, I would also note, is not just in the actual definition, but also in the nature of the offenses themselves. So I know you're going to turn to that shortly, and I'm sure have a good discussion on the scope of those offenses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cooper, I have you next, and then Mr. Garrison, and then Mr. Virani. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper. Oh, and then Madam Findlay.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be brief. I wish to echo my dissatisfaction of having this dropped upon us at the very last minute in the middle of clause by clause. An amendment that fundamentally changes the bill in terms of the definition, a definition that I believe, based upon quite a bit of evidence before our committee, is already vague and overly broad in its scope, and certainly criminal code sections that are vague and overly broad cannot stand. They're contrary to fundamental justice. And Monsieur Fortin, I think rightfully, raised questions about who's going to be captured by this. What circumstances might arise in which this section of the code is going to come down upon them, and they're suddenly charged with an offense. I mean, the Supreme Court of Canada, in the Mabier decision, was clear that one has the right to know whether or not the act that they're engaging in constitutes a crime. And I don't even know at this point what we're frankly voting on or not voting on, because we have such a change to the language of the definition, a definition that I reiterate is problematic without the benefit of hearing from witnesses to press them in a substantive way on this substantive change. And on that basis, I won't be able to support the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. We'll now go to Mr. Garrison.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to state again that I have certainly been asking questions during all the hearings on this about adding gender expression to this bill, and that it was part of this amendment package. And in terms of the, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, in terms of the objections about not knowing what gender expression means. Gender expression was put into the Criminal Code of Canada, the hate crime section, was put into the Canadian Human Rights Code more than 5 years ago. It is well established in law what these terms mean. We know what they mean. And I guess I'm trying not to use the word petulance, but that's the word that comes to mind. When you see what's going on in the community with regard to transgender people and non-binary people, this debate is somewhat shameful, I think. And if you doubt that, I'll share some of the.
That's ridiculous.
That is a ridiculous statement. That is most disrespectful of everyone here. I'm really shocked.
Shameful.
Mr. Cooper, thank you. Mr. Garrison, I advise you to please choose your words a little bit carefully.
I'll volunteer to share the more than 200 personal attacks on me in social media, including threats that I've received this week for defending the rights of transgender and non-binary Canadians. If any of you think this is not a serious matter in our society, I'll be happy to share those with you.
I'm sure it's not from anyone on this committee, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I did not interrupt anyone else here.
Mr. Garrison, the floor is yours. I'll remind members that there's ways that they can get the floor by raising your hands or raising points of order. Right now, the floor is Mr. Garrison's. Go ahead, sir.
So I have no problem in having a substantive debate on this, and I accept that there will be differences of opinion. But to say that we don't know what we're talking about, we do not know what these terms mean, that's what I'm referring to. These are well-established terms in law. These are well-established principles that we've established in the Canadian Human Rights Code and in the hate crime section of the Criminal Code. So when some members say this makes it more likely not to survive a charter challenge, that's patently false, as these things are already part of rights in Canada and have been for some time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. I have Mr. Virani and then Madame Findlay. Go ahead, Mr. Virani.
Madam Chair, a couple of points. The language gender expression was injected into Canadian statutes in Bill C-16 in the last Parliament, of which Mr. Cooper, among others, was a member. So again, to purport that people aren't familiar with the term gender expression or what it denotes or defines is completely and patently inaccurate. Reiterate that gender expression is used in the debate in the actual motion that we're debating right now, which is NDP2, and my suggested changes to NDP2. It's also used in NDP3 and in the final amendment to the preamble. So again, to purport that there's somehow some element of surprise here is patently inaccurate in terms of the documents that are before the committee. And the third point is that somehow it's been imputed that having discussions with other members of Parliament and other parties is somehow untoward. I would say, put it as a bit of a straightforward fact that in a minority parliament, there are always discussions, as there should be, with other members of parliament and other parties with respect to where consensus can be achieved. And what's transpired here is that we as government members, I and my Liberal colleagues, saw an amendment, NDP2, that referenced gender expression, but also went beyond that. And what we tried to do is find some common ground as to how to ensure gender expression and the protections that follow therefrom are entrenched in this important piece of legislation, but all the time maintaining that careful balance that this legislation seeks to strike. If there are those in this committee who have troubles with that sort of approach, I would put it to them that that violates the spirit of cooperative parliamentary functioning in a minority parliament. And secondly, the bottom line is, and I believe, and I hope that all of us believe, that the rights of trans and non-binary Canadians are as important as all of the other groups that we seek to protect through this bill. That's the motivation behind proposing the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Varani. Madam Finley, I have you next on the list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have absolutely no objection, particularly in a minority parliament, with members of this committee or any committee having discussions with members from parties other than their own. I think that is a spirit of cooperation, and I think that's good. My problem is with selecting those who you speak to and leaving others out of the equation so that they're surprised by what is coming before them. That is a problem. I think out of respect for all of us trying to grapple with a difficult piece of legislation, that we should all be included in those kinds of discussions, at least given some notice, as opposed to a select person or persons being given notice and the rest of us being left to figure it out. On that note, yes, I am aware that the term gender expression is in C16. What I was trying to understand, and this is probably a question for the Department of Justice officials, is I don't believe there is anywhere in the Criminal Code of Canada where the term gender expression is in fact defined. It is used in C16, but I see no definition there. In fact, I believe it was expressed at the time that it should be left to courts and tribunals to define it. And so my question is the term gender expression defined in the Criminal Code of Canada? And is the term practice defined in the Criminal Code of Canada? If they are defined then already, then that gives us something to go on. If they are not already defined in legislation, then I have a problem with inclusion in this bill when the testimony that we've heard from many witnesses, I mean, we all heard the same testimony. Some people wanted it included specifically, others didn't want it included specifically because they weren't sure what in fact it means. We are not talking about just any legislation. We're talking about amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada that carry with them criminal sanctions. That is the whole point of contention in this bill. I don't even think it's the overall idea of the bill. It's the fact that we are dealing with criminal sanction against certain behaviors that are in this bill without sufficient definition. So my question is to the Department of Justice officials, where in the Criminal Code of Canada is gender expression defined? If you could point that out to me, I'd appreciate it. And where is the term practice defined? I would also appreciate those definitions being pointed out to me. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No, neither term is defined, but as I've stated before, they are used in other contexts. In fact, Mr. Fortin has given quite an excellent definition of gender expression today, and they're used in many different contexts. So we understand what it is they mean based on the contextual purposive interpretation of where they appear. And I would note that these terms in particular, practice, treatment, or service, are used in relation to conversion therapy in other pieces of legislation that refer to conversion therapy without definition because they're understood to have clear ordinary meaning in that context. And I believe not just the rules of statutory interpretation support that, but also the minister's comments before this committee when he appeared before you support that as well.
Madam Chair, can I respond here to her? I mean, in what
if you don't mind, can you please, so that I can address the other members that have raised their hands? I've made a note to come back to you after Monsieur Fortin. Go ahead, Mr. Maloney.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll be brief. Just a couple of points. One on this. Well, actually, first with what Ms. Finley said, I appreciate what you said about consulting with other members of the committee, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. But there are times that a representative from one party will speak on behalf of his or her colleagues when dealing with other members of the committee. Mr. Virani did this on this occasion. I'm sure it happens on your party too, whether it's Mr. Moore or you or Mr. Lewis or Mr. Cooper. But so there was nothing sinister there, and which is really the point I want to get at, is because Mr. Moore has suggested that out of the blue, unbeknownst to anybody, that Mr. Virani showed up today and dropped something on the committee that was outside the scope of anything we had talked about, and it couldn't be further from the case. So ascribing any sort of sinister, objective to Mr. Virani is not only wrong, it's a little bit offensive, frankly. The issue was on the table in more than one amendment proposed by Mr. Garrison, and we heard ample evidence from witnesses on the subject to. I don't think there's anything inappropriate about the procedure whatsoever. We're having a discussion on an issue that's clearly on the table. It was part of the amendments proposed. And as for the minister coming here, I was here when the minister came to the committee, and I never heard him say once, this bill is untouchable. He's always, of course, open to amendments. He respects the committee and the process, and he respects all of the members regardless of what party they're on. So he's open to listen to suggestions on amendments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. Monsieur Fortin.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to come back with a question for the analyst. What I heard her say in answering my question earlier on is that a practice is broader than a treatment, and treatment and practice are not the same as a service. And so there is lack of clarity. There seems to be a bit of a blurred line there. So I understand that a practice is broad, and I also understand that it may be that in defense, a parent might be able to say, okay, when I tell my daughter, don't wear so much makeup, or when I tell my son, I don't think you should wear heels to school today, there is a chance that that person could indeed be validated if they were accused of practicing conversion therapy, which they would not be. But I'll give you another example. Most of us have had children and still have children. So there comes a time sometimes where you might want to seek a psychological interview for whatever reason. I've known parents who have gone to see a psychologist because their children were bedwetting, or they've gone to see a psychologist because their children were victims of bullying at school. So they visited psychologists for behavioral issues, say, with their children. So my question is, say you have a parent with their 8-year-old, same example, is in a therapy relationship with a psychologist, and the parent says, I'd like you to look at another problem. Not only is my child bedwetting, but we've also realized now that he wants to wear makeup when he goes to school. He wants to wear heels. And of course, he suffers at school, and the other little boys beat him up. This is a terrible thing. So I would like you, the therapist, to have a look at that and talk to my child so that my son understands this is a bad idea. So by proceeding in this way, would the parent be committing another crime, which would be inciting a health professional or requesting that a health professional commit a criminal act? Because this would be criminalized now for a psychotherapist to tell an 8-year-old child, hey, it's not a great idea to put makeup on and to wear heels to school. This would be a crime because it would be treatment offered by a health professional which would aim to restrict gender expression. So that's the first part of my question. So when you ask a health professional to intervene with respect to your child, this would become a criminal act. I would like to seek clarity from Ms. Levman on this. And the second part of my question is I'd just like to recall, I was listening to Mr. Garrison earlier, and I agree with him when he says we have to protect transgender and other Canadians. I absolutely don't have a problem with that. And here at the Bloc, we want to stop conversion therapy. So we agree. But I do have a problem with the definition. I think that in our effort to do the right thing, we might be going too broad. So I just like to recall now that we're not here about expressly to protect certain rights. So in our charter, we ban discrimination based on sexual orientation, and we could ban discrimination with respect to gender expression as well. But as Ms. Finley said, and as many of us have repeated, and I think sometimes we forget about this, this is the Criminal Code of Canada. So someone who is accused, whether they're guilty or not later on, that's the different thing. But if they are accused of a criminal charge, that's going to be with them their entire life, whether they're acquitted or not. And if they're guilty, of course, that's worse. They get a criminal record, sanctions, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to be careful. Ms. Levman said it earlier, and she was right. When you interpret the code, you need to have a narrow interpretation. You can't go too broadly in the interpretation. And I would submit here that it seems that we're going so broad, and Mr. Virani in his amendment, and same goes for Mr. Garrison, they confirm that we're trying to go extra, extra broad here. And we're not here to protect so broadly, but to criminalize certain acts by these broad interpretations. And I find that of great concern, Madam Chair. And I would like the official to tell me what she thinks of the situation that I gave as an example. So a parent requesting that a health professional, whether it be a social worker, a teacher, a psychologist, whoever, tell or start a conversation with a child who might be 8 years old, wants to wear makeup and heels to school. Is there a risk that they might be accused of having encouraged someone to engage in conversion therapy on their own child? Thank you.
Liftman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, and you referenced my stressing the statutory interpretation principle of narrow construction of criminal legislation, but it goes beyond that. It also has to be purposive and contextual interpretation, and that means that courts will have to look at the overall objective of the legislation, and that is to stop practices that are designed to change identity to conform with societal norms. So in cases like the one that you are describing, or that Mr. Fortin is describing, those principles would all be at play. And then I would just remind the committee that we can't look at the definition in a vacuum without also looking at the corresponding offenses. So when I believe Mr. Fortin was referring to the proposed offense that would be causing a child to undergo conversion therapy. So that activity would also have to be proven in a case such as the one that Mr. Fortin has raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just for members' clarity, the debate right now that we're having is on what is Lib 1, which is the new language that has been proposed to everybody by email today, and not on NDP 2. And so if there's no opposition, NDP 2 can be withdrawn. Just for procedural clarity. Is that okay with everybody? Thumbs up? Yep. Okay, I see consent. Madam Finley, you are next.
Thank you. I'm getting more confused as we're going along here, because in answer to Monsieur Fortin's question on gender expression, I believe Ms. Levman answered based on gender identity. Those are two different things. I think this is the struggle here at the moment with Lib 1, as you were referring to it, Madam Chair, is we're talking about having, again, Ms. Levman used the expression, the definition, and yet had confirmed to me there is no definition in the Criminal Code of Canada. So it's getting confusing to me because we're conflating 2 and 3 different issues. right now, Lib 1 is before us, as I understand it, and that has to do with gender expression. Something that is already spoken to in the criminal code and human rights legislation, but is not defined, as has been confirmed. But also in the earlier response from Ms. Levman to my question, this is what I think I was talking about, because time's going by here between my ability to follow up, was she used a phrase something along the lines of ordinary use or something like that. And this is what the struggle is here, because gender expression is very broad. We heard that from testimony from several witnesses. Myself, as someone who has to vote on this, I am not clear on exactly how much that captures under criminal sanction now. And when Ms. Levman spoke to ordinary use, I don't believe there is an ordinary use of that term. I'm open to hearing from others about it, including my friend Mr. Garrison, on what the ordinary use is of the term. But from what I'm hearing from Monsieur Fortin, from what I feel myself, from what I've heard from witnesses, is that there is confusion about what that would encompass. And there's been a lot of reference here back to the testimony of Minister Lametti in the beginning of our deliberations here. And as I pointed out before, one of the first things the minister said when he spoke on this bill was, there seems to be confusion about the scope of this bill. It is up to the government to, with their own legislation, to remove that confusion, which is exactly why we're struggling with very broad definitions, which we are now, the proposal is to expand those definitions and make them even broader, which to my mind makes them even more confusing and harder to pin down. So I don't know if Madame Levman has more she wants to say to explain to me what she meant by ordinary use, but I'm open to hear.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, may I proceed?
Yes, you may. Sorry, it's a lag in my...
Yeah, no problem. Yes, and I'm sorry that I'm not sure about the reference to ordinary use. I think that I have, though, acknowledged that gender expression is a broad term. It does have meaning in law. I believe I said that. It's used in other areas of law. And I also referenced established rules of statutory interpretation in terms of how, not just gender expression, but terms like practice and other terms in the definition of conversion therapy in the bill, how courts will apply those principles to these terms, or that they will. First and foremost, the narrow construction of criminal law statutes or criminal legislation, and also the fact that legislation has to be interpreted purposively, which means consistent with its objectives. And that's where my reference to gender identity came in, because the overall objective of the bill is to stop practices that are designed to change gender identity to cisgender. We know that those types of interventions often involve efforts to reduce or repress gender expression. And as I explained at the beginning of my remarks, it's my understanding that the intention, or at least one of the main intentions behind including this amendment, is to address certain evidentiary issues that are of concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Moore, I have you next. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I do have to comment on one thing. Mr. Maloney said that I inferred that something was sinister. I guess that's his words, not mine. I did not say that anything that Mr. Virani did was sinister, and I don't think it is. What I'm saying is, out of respect for everybody, the government knew last night that this amendment was going to be table dropped because they included a change to the preamble. That was at 4:30. So there is no doubt, I don't think anyone could argue, I hope, with the fact that we are dealing with something that's been table dropped. So it is completely unfair to your fellow colleagues to then expect us to be ready on the spot to deal with what's been table dropped. That's why we have deadlines for submitting legislation, amendments to legislation. So, that was his language, certainly not mine, but I think there's absolutely no doubt that what the government has done here today has caused a great deal of problems with our ability to do clause by clause. There's no doubt about that, because members did not have the benefit of having this even one day in advance, let alone a few days in advance like we had agreed to. So, I don't know that, I think it's very clear that the government has now table dropped an amendment to this legislation that, in the department's own words, greatly broadens the definition, because gender expression is a broad term. And it is also, at the department expert testimony, is an undefined term in the criminal code. So we have a term that's undefined in the criminal code that does broaden the definition. And, not to belabor it, but there was reference to the charter statement on this legislation. The charter statement that I saw was based on the C6 as presented by the minister to our committee. The new change that the government has table dropped is an expansion of C6. And if there has been an updated charter statement, I haven't had the benefit of seeing it. It could be that it's on the department website. I don't know. But my question to the department is, we've seen the charter statement then for, and the minister spoke to this in his testimony on what was C6, the original version. Is there an updated charter statement with this amendment?
Ms. Levman?
Thank you. No, we don't tend to update charter statements, but my understanding is it still applies to what you're looking at today. So that's all of the considerations, the charter considerations are outlined there. They all remain the same considerations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll call the question on Lib 1, and just for members' clarity, G1 the vote on Lib 1 will apply to the vote on G1 because they are consequential to one another. And also, if Lib 1 is adopted, NDP 3 and CPC 1 cannot be moved. Go ahead, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Ms. Finlay?
No.
Monsieur Fortin?
No.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sangha?
Yes.
Mr. Virani?
Yes.
And Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Yeas pour 6, nays contre 5, 5. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And so Lib 1 and G1 are adopted. Now we'll go to, and consequently, NDP
Excusez, Madame la
3.
Présidente.
Calendar, Lib 1 is Mr. Virani's amendment. What is G1?
G1 is the amendment at the very last page of your package, which refers to just adding that same language that we've been debating to the preamble.
OK. Donc, celui...
Yes, okay, so this one also is rejected. Is that it?
We just adopted Lib 1 and G1. We just voted and the vote was counted and
OK.
Is that okay?
Yeah, merci.
Yes, thank you.
To clarify, NDP 3 cannot be moved. CPC 1 cannot be moved because we've adopted Lib 1. So we'll now go to NDP 4. Mr. Garrison?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The original bill has a for greater certainty clause in clause 5, which attempts to say what is not covered in this ban on conversion therapy. And it had two sections, A and B. And we heard testimony and concerns from members about the vagueness of those two provisions in the for greater certainty clause. And so what I've done is draft an amendment that more parallels clinical practice than what was already there in the bill. And so what the amendment would say is that it doesn't cover things that relate to the exploration and development of an integrated personal identity without favoring any particular sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. So in other words, any good faith attempts to assist a person with any questions about their identity or development of their identity would not be covered by this bill. And it is neutral, but the presumption of this amendment is that what we're defending here is those good faith efforts that are not in fact aimed at changing or denigrating any particular orientation, identity, or form of expression. So I think it's an important amendment. I think it matches the testimony that we heard from many witnesses, and I hope it will receive broad support in the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrison. Mr. Kellaway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll be supporting this amendment, and thank you to MP Garrison for putting it forward. This amendment could bring greater clarity to the types of therapies that do not fall within the bill's conversion therapy definition. So in particular, the amendment clarifies that legitimate therapies for those seeking help to explore or develop their own identity do not favor one particular identity over another, which is a real key piece to this amendment. I'm thankful for the member putting it forward, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kellaway. I don't see any more hands raised, so I'll call the question on NDP 4. Mr. Clerk?
Madam Chair, Mr. Cooper?
No.
Ms. Finlay?
No.
Monsieur Fortin?
No.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sangha? Mr. Sangha?
Yes.
Mr. Virani?
Yes.
Mr. Zuberi?
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4, 4.
So NDP 4 is adopted. It carries. So now we'll go to CPC 2. Mr. Moore, I give you the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So CPC 2, as you recall, the minister in his introduction of this bill outlined what the goal of the bill was and what it was intended to capture. And then when we looked at the clear language, the plain reading of the bill, we saw that the definition was certainly problematic, and we heard from witness testimony how the definition could capture good faith discussions that shouldn't be captured under the criminal code sanctions in this bill. So what this definition, what this amendment does is it takes language from the directly from the Justice Department website. So under definition of conversion therapy, the minister has a couple of for greater certainty clauses. And the two that he has is for greater certainty, this definition does not include a practice, treatment, or service that relates to a person's gender transition or to a person's exploration of their identity or to its development. This amendment would include the language from the website, which deals with conversations on sexual orientation, sexual feelings, gender identity, such as where teachers, school counselors, pastoral counselors, faith leaders, doctors, mental health professionals, friends, or family members provide support to persons struggling with their sexual orientation, sexual feelings, or gender identity. The language, while may not be perfect, but it is from the government's site. And I do think that it addresses some of the concerns that we've heard from witnesses who are concerned about how broad the definition is. And now the definition is even broader thanks to the amendment that was just passed. So I think it's all the more important in light of the definition, that the expansion to the definition that was table dropped on us, that was just passed, that we explicitly say what is not included. The minister has seen fit to include 2 lines for greater certainty. This would add a third. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Mr. Maloney?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Moore, for your for introducing this, proposing this amendment, and for your comments. I'm concerned that this amendment would defeat the purpose of the bill, and even though this is a criminal legislation, I'm not going to get into motive and describing intent here, Mr. Moore, as we've discussed already. But mere expressions of personal points of view do not amount to practice, service, or treatment and are not caught by the definition. So I think, and look, I've made my views well known throughout the discussion on this committee. As I said to Cardinal Carter the other day, I think the conversations in the confessional are not in any way going to be impeded going forward by this legislation, or conversations with parents or counselors. So I'm going to oppose this bill. The second point is that the for greater certainty clause provides examples of what definitions already exist. Listing a group of situations that might be captured here. We've had a discussion, and thank you, Ms. Lubman, for talking to us about statutory interpretation. I remember arguing statutory interpretation cases in my younger days as a lawyer, and I avoided it later purposely. But you know, judges do their very best to interpret legislation based on its intent, and the more specific you get, the more exclusive it gets, ironically. So by listing all of these additional situations, you're actually excluding others. And I think for that reason, it creates more confusion and undermines the purpose of the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. I have Mr. Cooper next. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wish to speak in support of this amendment. I believe the amendment is necessary, having regard for the fact that the definition provided for is incredibly expansive in nature, and I am concerned that it could cover situations involving parents, counselors, faith leaders, and others. And we heard a significant concern expressed in that regard. The minister points to the 2 exemptions, namely to a person's gender transition. Well, I would submit that that is quite narrow in scope in terms of what that would cover pursuant to that exemption. And second of all, with respect to a person's exploration of their identity or to its development, that is an incredibly vague term. And so I think what is required is clarity. And it's nice and well for the minister to be confident that it's not going to cover these types of good faith conversations. It's nice to post a reassurance on the Department of Justice's website. But what matters is not the minister's reassurance or the reassurance is provided on the department's website. What matters is what is in the legislation. And I believe that clarity is required but is currently lacking, and I therefore will be supporting this important amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Madam Findlay, and then Mr. Garrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to speak in favor of this amendment. We heard a lot of testimony, and we've had submissions, a few I've been able to read at least, before this committee, speaking to the need for some comfort around understanding just what is captured in these amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada that bear criminal sanction along with them. And we've heard a lot of people here today speak to, witnesses from the Department of Justice, as well as members of the committee, speak to what a judge does and doesn't do in interpreting statute. I've never been appointed as a judge, but I was a administrative law judge for 5 years on the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal. And in that capacity, knowing that my decisions were appealable to the courts as they were appealed, in fact, in some instances, I was always very mindful in taking in evidence as to what I was and was not able to look at. And in administrative law, you actually can take into account and weigh evidence in a bit broader context than perhaps you can in a regular court of law, certainly a criminal court of law. And lists are very helpful for a judge in interpreting. They need not be exhaustive. That's why you see language, as is in this amendment, saying such as. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list. I heard the minister, and I believe Mr. Varani and others say, well, lists aren't very good. Lists are helpful, in fact. Lists are helpful in interpretation. We've heard a lot of testimony here today about intention is something, legislative intention is something that judges do look at in deciding these cases. With respect to websites, we've heard a lot about, well, it's on the website, or someone can look it up on the website. With respect to websites, as far as I know, websites are not considered authoritative in courts of law, and I've never actually heard of a judge referring to a website in interpreting. That's not where you go. Occasionally, I have seen decisions where a judge has looked to statements of a minister in and around the passing of legislation. Again, however, not authoritative. Why? Because ministers come and go, with all due respect to those who hold those offices. When we're dealing with putting forward legislation, particularly that carries with it criminal sanction, it is essential that the wording is specific enough, clearly understood enough, that any future minister and any future judge, given the task to interpret that legislation or rely on that legislation, knows what it is they're looking at, knows what it is they're relying on. And I frankly don't understand why the government is not open to clarifying this legislation, which the broad intent of which is clear, but the specifics are lacking in terms of definitions and language that would give comfort to those who are not seeking to do anything coercive, who are seeking only to help and support. We've heard testimony from witnesses over the course of discussion on C6 that said, you know, this kind of counseling, whether it be from faith leaders or from people in the general counseling fields, was very helpful to me in just trying to get to where I needed to get in terms of my gender identity and or gender expression. And I would hate to see a situation where we pass legislation with criminal sanction attached to it that would put a chill on the kinds of supports and the kinds of taking of confidences that are necessary to help people as they struggle with the issues we're dealing with here. My colleague, Mr. Maloney, spoke of the Cardinal. He has a different interpretation than the Cardinal, who said he spoke for literally millions of Catholics in the GTA as to what is meant here. And it seems to me when we have a witness, and I will say I'm not Catholic, but when we have a witness whose judgment, whose guidance, whose counsel is sought literally by millions of Canadians, we should be cautious and we should take into account that further definition, further help in interpretation for future judicial comment, for future judicial decisions is the way we should go. We should not preclude people who are seeking our help in understanding this legislation. And we've heard from, let's just take faith leaders for a moment. We've heard from faith leaders and had submissions from faith leaders of almost every faith I can think of who've said we're against coercive conversion therapy. We are against the idea of trying to force anyone in one way or the other, but we need clarity. And we need to understand that our conversations we may have that are supporting one's own journey, supporting someone as they maybe for any number of reasons need clarification within their own minds, within their own spirits in terms of where they're going in their life, that those would somehow be shut down. And I'm asking people to really think on this. This is not in any way trying to derail the overall intent of this bill. It's not meant in any way to restrict the overall intent. What it's trying to do is give a level of comfort to those who find themselves in those very sensitive conversations, very usually confidential conversations that they have in the course of their chosen field, be it professional or faith, or even in terms of family or friendship, that those not be restricted in, I believe, an unintended way. Let's be clear. We've taken in this amendment the wording directly from the government's own website. I have to assume from that the government of the day believes in this wording, or they wouldn't have put it up on their website. But as I said, a judge in interpreting this in the future, or the ordinary Canadian public trying to understand what is permissible and what is not going to go to a website. They're going to look at the legislation. That's our job here today. And I hope that we will fulfill it by allowing this amendment to go through that in no way subverts the overall intent of this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Madame Findlay. Mr. Garrison, I have you next on the list. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I do not doubt the good intentions of Mr. Moore in proposing this amendment. But I have to say, I just do not see that any of the things listed here are actually covered by this bill. Second thing I would say about this one is that there is a principle of statutory interpretation that's colloquially known as inclusion implies exclusion, and that's the danger of any list being put in, because those not listed, it seems to imply, would not enjoy the same protections as those listed. And so for that reason, I would also oppose this amendment. But I'd actually like a ruling, Madam Chair, whether this is actually an order, given the fact that we have passed the previous NDP 4, which has amended this section. There is no longer an A and B to which you could add a C in this bill. And so I wonder if this bill, given that we previously adopted an amendment that has altered that section, is actually in order. Thank you.
That is an excellent question, Mr. Garrison. I'll turn to our legislative clerk to clarify.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have noticed that also. And if this is the wish of the committee to adopt this motion, we would recommend just a little something just to adjust, to make the link between this amendment and the rest of the text. I can even turn on my colleague who has prepared something if the committee wants to adopt this amendment.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Garrison, on your point of order.
So my understanding of that ruling is that this amendment as it stands is not in order. And if it requires amendment, it's clearly not in order. So I would ask again the chair to rule the amendment out of order given the previous amendment that was adopted.
Madame la Présidente, moi j'aurais besoin de précision d'un point.
Madam Chair, I also have a point of order. I'd just like some specifics. I'm surprised to hear Mr. Garrison on this. I might have missed something here. But Lib 1 that we just adopted does not prevent, seeing as it ends with, it doesn't remove A and B. As far as I know, A and B are there, but I might be wrong on this. Could you please explain why A and B have been struck?
Monsieur Fortin, the conflict is with NDP 4 and CPC 2. So if you want to take a look at NDP 4, and in the meantime, I'll pass it on to our legislative clerk to explain.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The solution to the amendment is it needs a sub-amendment, as I said, just to add few words to make sure that there is a link between the main text and the amendment. If nobody wants to move this sub-amendment, it means that the amendment is out of order. This is the chair who decides that, by the way.
I give opportunity to Mr. Moore or to any of his colleagues to see if they would like to move that sub-amendment. Mr. Cooper, you'd like to move the amendment, the sub-amendment?
So what I would move to just address this issue is to incorporate language for greater certainty. This definition does not include, and that would, if passed, make our main amendment admissible.
So the question is on the sub-amendment at this time. So we'll call the question on the sub-amendment. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Cooper?
In support.
Ms. Findlay?
I support, thanks.
Monsieur Fortin?
Oui.
Mr. Garrison?
No.
Mr. Calloway?
No.
Mr. Lewis?
In support.
Mr. Maloney?
No.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Sangha?
No.
Mr. Virani?
No.
Et puis, on a Madame Martinez-Ferrada, je crois.
Je vote non.
Yeas pour 5. Nays contre 6.
So the sub-amendment is defeated. I don't see any more hands raised, so I'll call the question on CPC 2. Shall CPC 2 carry?
Madam Chair, point of order.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, we heard clearly from the clerk that if the subamendment was defeated, that this is out of order. So there is.
Oh,
no
it
need
is.
for
It is out of. My apologies. Thank you for clarifying that, Mr. Garrison. We shall now move on to NDP 6. Mr. Garrison, I believe that you wanted to withdraw that. If you'd like to speak.
I withdraw the amendment.
Thank you. So then we'll go on to NDP 7, Mr. Garrison.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The purpose of NDP 7 is quite simple. It's to replace the wording against a person's will, which is in the current bill, with without consent. And in the criminal code, consent is a much more well-established concept that we know the meaning of and we know how it's applied. And I'm not personally familiar with any other part of the criminal code that uses against a person's will. So it really makes the language much more standard to what already exists in the criminal code. And then that would allow in the future, I have an Amendment 8 to specify what consent is, but even without a further amendment, it would place this clearly in an established realm of law. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Garrison. Mr. Virani?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I think it is important to make sure that we have consistent language, and we've had this discussion already about ensuring consistency on as between the code and other statutes. And I know that, for example, without consent is the language that's used in the criminal code with respect to sexual assault provisions. I think this is an important amendment that I think clarifies and facilitates the interpretation of which we've heard a great deal about today from various interventions. So on that basis, I think it makes sense to clarify that the language being employed in this section of the bill reflect a lack of consent as opposed to being against someone's will. So on that basis, I will be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Virani. So I'll call the question then on NDP 7. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Ms. Findlay?
No.
Monsieur Fortin?
Oui.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Calloway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sangha?
Yes.
Mr. Virani?
Yes.
Madame Martinez-Ferrada?
Oui.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 4.
So NDP 7 is adopted. We'll now go to NDP 8. Mr. Garrison?
Thank you very much. I won't take much time on this. What NDP 8 does is attempt to define much more specifically what consent means in the construct of conversion therapy. And we heard many concerns about whether one can in fact consent to a practice which is fraudulent and harmful. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Maloney?
Thanks, Madam Chair. This amendment would list circumstances in which consent is not obtained in law for the purposes of the new offense that would prohibit causing a person to undergo conversion therapy without their consent, as was proposed by NDP 7. The listed circumstances in which consent would not be obtained in law are informed by the Criminal Code sexual assault provisions, which vitiate consent in similar circumstances. However, the additional circumstances that are broader in scope are also listed. Now, currently, the bill does not prevent adults from seeking out conversion therapy where such services are provided free of charge, because the evidence shows that some adults have sought out conversion therapy and reported positive results. Now, because this amendment would sort of upset the balance that the bill seeks to achieve, I'm not going to support it, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Maloney. So I'll call the question on NDP 8. Mr. Clerk.
Cooper?
No.
Ms. Finley?
No.
Monsieur Fortin?
No.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Calloway? Mr. Calloway? I have not heard your response, Mr. Calloway. Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Maloney?
No.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sanga?
No.
Mr. Virani?
No.
Madame Martinez Ferrada?
Non.
Donc, yes pour 1, nays contre 10, 10.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So NDP 8 is defeated. And as I had indicated earlier, NDP 9 and NDP 10 were consequential to NDP 1, so we have already dealt with those. The next amendment before us is NDP 11. Mr. Garrison.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, it's a very simple change that adds the words promotes or to the concept of advertising. So it will capture unpaid forms of promotion of conversion therapy, as well as paid advertising and unpaid advertising. So it's a fairly simple amendment that tries to capture what actually goes on in the shadows around conversion therapy and would prohibit promotion as well as advertising. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Garrison. I see Mr. Virani's hand is raised. Oh, nope, it's gone.
I'm sorry, I had my hand raised, but it was left over. I believe my colleague, Mr. Sanga.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Sanga.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment, NDP 11 amendment proposed advertising offense to include promoting an offense to provide conversion therapy. Both promotion and the advertisement are those synonymous terms which Mr. Garrison has already explained. Accordingly, this amendment would ensure that the advertising offense protects against the discriminatory public messaging as comprehensively as possible. I therefore support this amendment.
Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Mr. Sanga. We'll not seeing any hands. We'll call the question on NDP 11. Mr. Clerk.
No.
Miss Finley?
No.
Monsieur Fortin?
Oui.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Calloway?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Mr. Maloney?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Sanga?
Yes.
Mr. Virani?
Yes.
And Ms. Zaid?
Yes.
Yes pour 7, 7. Et nays contre 4, 4.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So NDP 11 carries. The next question is on Clause 5. 2 members. Shall Clause 5 carry? Mr. Clerk? Sorry, shall Clause 5 as amended carry? Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Cooper?
abstain.
Miss Finley,
I abstain.
Monsieur Fortin,
Je m'abstiens.
Mr. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Callaway,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
I abstain.
Mr. Maloney,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
I abstain.
Mr. Sangha,
Yes to carry.
Mr. Virani,
Yes.
Ms. Zaid.
Yes.
So, Madam Chair, yes pour 6, nays contre 0, 0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So clause 5 as amended carries. The next question is on clause 6. So 2 members, shall clause 6 carry? Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Cooper,
I abstain.
Miss Finley,
I abstain.
Monsieur Fortin,
Pour.
Mr. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Callaway,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
I abstain.
Mr. Maloney,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
I abstain.
Mr. Sangha,
Yes.
Mr. Virani,
Yes.
Ms. Zaid,
Yes.
yes pour 7, nays contre 0, 0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So clause 6 carries. Now we move on to the preamble, PV3, and I do have a ruling on PV3, which is inadmissible as there have been no amendments to the bill to justify amending the preamble that has been adopted, that have been adopted. And I will reference the House of Commons Procedure and Practice 3rd edition, page 774, which states, in the case of a bill that has been referred to the committee after second reading, a substantive amendment to the preamble is admissible only if it is rendered necessary by amendments made to the bill. In addition, an amendment to the preamble is in order when its purpose is to clarify it or to ensure uniformity of the English or French versions. So it is, in my opinion, that the proposed amendment is inadmissible. So with that, and having already dealt with G1, I call the question on the preamble as amended. Shall the preamble as amended carry?
A recorded vote, Madam Chair.
Recorded vote? Yes.
Mr.
On
Cooper,
division?
I abstain.
Miss Finley,
I abstain.
Monsieur Fortin,
Ouais. Je vais voter pour, mais j'aurais envie de m'abstenir aussi.
Mr. Garrison,
Yes.
Mr. Callaway,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
I abstain.
Mr. Maloney,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
I abstain.
Mr. Sangha,
Yes.
Mr. Virani,
Yes.
Ms. Zaid,
Yes.
yes pour 7, nays contre 0, 0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So the preamble carries. Shall the title carry? On division?
On division?
So title carries on division. Shall the bill as amended carry? I see that members would like a recorded vote. So, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Cooper,
Abstain.
Miss Finley,
I abstain.
Monsieur Fortin,
Pour.
Mr. Garrison,
In favor?
Mr. Callaway,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
I abstain.
Mr. Maloney,
Yes.
Mr. Moore,
Abstain.
Mr. Sangha,
Yes.
Mr. Virani,
Yes.
Ms. Zaid.
Yes.
Yeas pour 7, nays contre 0.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So the bill carries. Now the next question is, shall I report the bill as amended to the House? On division?
On division.
Great. And that concludes bills. Oh, sorry, one more. Shall the committee order a reprint of the bill as amended for the use of the House at report stage?
On division.
On division? Okay. Well, with that, having gone through all of C6 clause by clause, thank you, members, for a wonderful session. Thank you for all of your hard work, for your passion, your dedication. A special thank you to all of our support teams, the interpretation, the analysts, the IT teams. You guys have really kept us afloat. Our clerk, our legislative clerks, thank you all. I wish all of you a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and all the best in the new year. Meeting is adjourned.
Take care.